Greetings, my name is John Gabriel and this is the New Calculus channel. So I'd like to talk today about a topic that I suppose most of you know about, and it's a topic of patents. Now, what is a patent? So according to the dictionary, it's a government authority or license conferring a right or title for a set period, sometimes for life, especially the sole right to exclude others from making, using, or selling an invention. Okay? Now, if you think about perfect concepts or noumena, noumena are perfect concepts, and perfect concepts exist independently of the human mind, or of any other mind, in fact. So, if they exist independently of any other mind and the human mind, this means that when we get an idea, we actually realize these perfect concepts, if that makes sense to you. I'll explain in a moment. So, well-formed concepts don't really belong to anybody. Let's look at, for example, the geometry of the ancient Greeks. We say of the ancient Greeks, does it belong to them because they realized it first? And what makes them special? Because, somebody else could have realized it, but they didn't. Well, let's think about that. So what glory is there, or what honor is there in realizing well-formed concepts? I have a saying which goes something like this: future inventions have always existed. We cannot realize them all. Does that make sense? Think about it. Well, let me give you an example of that. If the Wright brothers built the first airplane, and somebody 500 years ago thought in his mind, obviously, because he can't think anywhere else, of the method that they used to build it. But he didn't actually build the plane. He just thought out in his mind how he was going to do it. Isn't that the same as actually the plane existing and having created an instance of it? Never mind that it's tangible or intangible, but he thought of it. So it's as good as it exists, right? But 500 years ago, somebody would have looked at you and said, well, you're absolutely mad because there is no flying machine and there is no plane which the Orville brothers thought about or built, right? Naturally, there isn't. So you kind of just get to thinking, well, what are we talking about here? How are we going to solve this seemingly paradoxical statement that really there is nothing new under the sun? Okay, so for example, if somebody have thought of a Boeing 747, of the design of a Boeing 747 3,000 years ago, it would also have existed. In other words, a well-formed concept exists eternally. And now, to give you an example of well-formed concepts, we can go straight back to the first example of Greek geometry. And I say Greek geometry, it's not really Greek geometry, it's just geometry because it doesn't belong to the Greeks. And the only glory they have is that they realized it first. But somewhere down the line, sooner or later, if they hadn't realized it, somebody else would have. Okay? So they receive too much glory. Well, I suppose if you are able to come up with something 2,000 years before the next time anything remotely similar is realized, that makes you kind of special. but there's really nothing new there, okay? If, for example, they didn't discover it, sooner or later, somebody else would have. And it's the same with all these inventions that we see today. We see 3D printers, we see computer chips that can, run at incredible speeds, and military machines that seem unparalleled or unthought of, let's say, 5,000 years ago, okay? So, well-formed concepts exist independently of the human mind, and they are called noumena. The singular is noumenon, and the plural is noumena, and that is a term which Kant coined, the philosopher Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant coined the term noumenon and noumena. And a good example of one of the very first noumena is the incommensurable magnitude we call pi. If we hadn't thought about pi, does that mean it never existed? No, it's always existed whether we thought about it or not. We didn't have to think about it. In fact, pi exists without anyone thinking about it. Geometry exists without anyone thinking about it. Well-formed airplanes or starships that travel faster than the speed of light exist without us thinking about them. So, who is going to be the first to realize those well-formed concepts? And when they eventually do build such a machine, if they're still around and we're not destroyed by nuclear war or something else, then does that mean that they never existed? No, because any concept or any idea or any invention that is well formed and thought out is its equivalent that it's always existed. Okay? So it doesn't have to be manufactured or produced, just that it's existed. And this is what's behind Plato's philosophies and how the Greeks realized the geometry that they did, because Plato was the most brilliant philosopher that ever lived. And if you haven't read The Republic, I suggest you read it and study it very well, because wisdom begins with Plato, and Western civilization wouldn't exist today if it weren't for Plato. So, a well-formed concept exists independently of the human mind. And is it a good idea to have patents lasting a long time? I don't think so, because I think it's really unfair if somebody on another planet or another continent, let's put it on another continent rather, because we're living here on Earth, but another continent comes up with an idea that somebody in the United States has thought of and patented it, and then he can use it. But he didn't see or have any contact with the person in the US who did it. So patents are really very evil, and they don't do anyone any good. And now in my case, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new calculus. Now, the new calculus existed even before I thought of it, but nobody else had thought of it. So my pride is that I realized it first. And since I realized it first, I think I should be credited with having realized it first. But it doesn't mean that it belongs to me. It means that I was the first to think about it. And every time I realize a new idea or I come up with a new understanding, it doesn't really belong to me. Sorry, got a frog in my throat. It belongs to the realm of noumena, and I was just the first to realize it. That's all there is to it. So I just wanted to have a little informal chat with you. No PowerPoints, just talk a little bit about patents. And there's a lot more that I could talk about, but I think I'm going to stop now. because I'm out of breath, and that's all I can talk about up to this point. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed listening and you've been somewhat entertained, and that you will again tune in to watch one of my future videos. I'm John Gabriel, and this is the New Calculus channel. Till next time, goodbye.